This is Bone Chillers to disturb your dreams. Dare to join us? Click subscribe, ring the bell. But remember, we cannot guarantee your safety from the nightmares that await. Prepare to be thrilled, chilled, and filled with a sense of dread you'll find nowhere else. Welcome to the darkness. We've been waiting.
The Obsidian Children. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the dense woods that surrounded me. My footsteps were the only sound that broke the silence, as I trudged through the undergrowth, my backpack heavy with supplies. I had been hiking for hours, seeking solace in the untouched beauty of nature. But as the shadows lengthened and the air grew colder, I knew I needed to find shelter for the night. That's when I saw it, a dilapidated house, nestled at the edge of the forest. It stood like a relic from another time, its windows shattered and roof sagging under the weight of years gone by. It was unsettling, to say the least, but desperation clung to me like a second skin. I had to spend the night somewhere, and this decaying structure seemed like my only option. I approached cautiously, my flashlight casting a feeble beam of light on the peeling paint and overgrown porch. The air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and rot. Swallowing my unease, I pushed the creaking door open and stepped inside. The interior was just as decrepit as the exterior. Cobwebs clung to every corner, and a thick layer of dust covered the furniture. I set my backpack down and tried to ignore the unease that prickled at the back of my neck. "It's just an old house," I muttered to myself, attempting to convince both my rational mind and racing heart. I spread my sleeping bag on the floor, lit a few candles I had brought, and settled in for what I hoped would be a peaceful night's rest. As the night wore on, I found myself drifting in and out of sleep, the creaks and groans of the old house echoing in my dreams. Just as I was about to succumb to slumber once more, I was jolted awake by a soft, rhythmic knocking. My eyes shot open, my heart pounding as I tried to locate the source of the sound. The knocking persisted, growing louder with each passing moment. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it towards the door. There, in the dim light, I saw 3 small figures standing on the porch. My breath caught in my throat as I took in their appearance, children, or at least what seemed like children. Their skin was as black as obsidian, reflecting the moonlight in an unsettling way. And their eyes, those glowing yellow eyes, devoid of any pupils, fixed on me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I stumbled back, my heart racing, as the knocking continued. Their voices, soft as whispers, carried through the cracked door. "Please, mister, can you help us? We're lost." Every fiber of my being screamed at me to stay away, to lock the door and pretend I hadn't heard anything. But something, maybe curiosity or a misguided sense of compassion, compelled me to consider their plea. I hesitated, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. As if sensing my internal struggle, the children's voices grew more urgent. "Please, we're scared. We don't know where we are." Against my better judgment, I found myself inching towards the door. With trembling hands, I slowly turned the doorknob. The moment the door cracked open, a cold gust of wind rushed in, carrying with it an otherworldly chill that pierced my bones. The children stood before me, their expressions a mix of longing and desperation. "Thank you, mister," they chorused in eerie unison. I managed a weak smile, my unease growing with each passing second. "What are you doing out here so late?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "We were playing in the woods, and we got lost," one of them said, their voice innocent yet hollow. "Can you help us find our way home?" Another chimed in. I hesitated, my mind racing. A part of me wanted to slam the door shut, to shut out these unearthly beings. But another part, the part that couldn't ignore the fear in their voices, compelled me to help them. "All right," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll help you get home." Their eyes lit up, and for a moment, they seemed almost human. They stepped closer, and as they did, I noticed something strange. Their feet didn't quite touch the ground. It was as if they were gliding, hovering just above the floorboards. "We knew you'd help us," they said, their voices echoing like a haunting melody. I grabbed my backpack, slinging it over my shoulder, and followed them out into the night. The moon was a pale sliver in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the twisted trees. As we walked deeper into the woods, the air grew colder, and the trees seemed to close in around us. My heart pounded in my chest, a sense of dread settling over me like a heavy fog. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something far more sinister than a simple rescue mission. But I couldn't turn back now. I was bound to these Obsidian children, and I had no choice but to see this through to its unsettling end. Radiant intrusion. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a chill that seemed to seep into my bones. My friends and I had rented a remote cabin for the weekend, seeking a break from the stresses of college life. As the first night fell upon us, we gathered around a crackling campfire, trading ghost stories and nervous laughter. The stories were all too familiar: the haunted house, the vengeful spirit, the cursed object, and yet, they never failed to send shivers down our spines. As the last ember of the fire flickered out, we decided to retreat to the cozy cabin. Our footsteps echoed on the wooden deck as we entered, bringing with us the lingering eeriness of the tales we had shared. The cabin was rustic, with a large common area and several small bedrooms branching off from it. We settled in quickly, claiming our rooms and making ourselves at home. My room was simple: a bed with a thick quilt, a small desk, and an old rocking chair in the corner. The moon cast a soft glow through the window, illuminating the room in pale silver. I yawned and stretched, exhaustion pulling at my muscles. Crawling into bed, I closed my eyes, ready to drift into dreamland. But sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying the spooky stories we had exchanged earlier. The cabin creaked and settled, and the night grew quieter. Just as I felt my eyelids growing heavy, a soft, radiant light seeped beneath my bedroom door. My heart skipped a beat, and I sat up, rubbing my eyes in disbelief. I watched as the glow grew brighter, casting eerie patterns on the walls. Curiosity and trepidation battled within me. Could this be some sort of prank by my friends, trying to continue the spooky atmosphere of our campfire tales? I swung my legs out of bed and tiptoed to the door, my pulse racing. As I slowly opened the door, the intensity of the light hit me like a physical force. I shielded my eyes with my arm, squinting against the brilliance. When I finally adjusted, my heart nearly stopped. There, standing before me, was a figure. Its body seemed to be composed of shifting shadows, an amorphous form that swayed gently. But what caught and held my gaze were its eyes. They glowed with an otherworldly radiance, like twin stars embedded in the darkness. They pierced through me, seeming to see into the depths of my soul. Fear rooted me in place as the figure stepped closer. Its movements were slow, deliberate, as if it were studying me. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound emerged. It was as if my vocal cords had frozen in terror. The figure raised a shadowy appendage, extending it toward me. Panic surged within me, and I stumbled backward, falling to the floor. The figure continued its approach, its glowing eyes never leaving mine. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. A strangled cry tore from my throat as I bolted from the room, slamming the door shut behind me. My friends, awakened by my panicked flight, rushed out of their own rooms to find me pale and shaking in the hallway. I struggled to catch my breath as I stammered out an explanation, recounting the unearthly intruder I had encountered. Skepticism flickered in their eyes as they exchanged doubtful glances. One of them even chuckled nervously, suggesting that I had merely been spooked by my own reflection in a mirror or a trick of the moonlight. But I knew what I had seen. Those radiant, piercing eyes were burned into my memory. As the minutes passed, tension hung in the air like a heavy fog. Suddenly, a soft, resonating hum filled the cabin, vibrating through the floorboards and rattling the windows. The color drained from our faces as the reality of the situation sank in. Whatever I had encountered was not of this world. The cabin seemed to vibrate with increasing intensity, and we huddled together in the common area, our earlier skepticism now replaced with sheer terror. The walls seemed to shimmer, and the very air felt charged with an otherworldly energy. Then, as abruptly as it had begun, the humming ceased. The cabin fell into an eerie silence, broken only by our ragged breaths. We exchanged glances, understanding passing between us. There was no denying it anymore. We were not alone, and whatever entity had invaded our space was far from friendly. As the night stretched on, we huddled together, clutching makeshift weapons and casting wary glances at every shadow. The pale light of dawn finally filtered through the windows, banishing the darkness that had held us captive. We emerged from the cabin, bleary-eyed and shaken, to find no trace of the radiant intruder. Though we tried to rationalize the events, to find a logical explanation for the inexplicable, the memory of those piercing, radiant eyes haunted us. The line between reality and the supernatural had blurred, leaving us forever changed by that night of terror and extraterrestrial intrusion. Infested suburbia. I used to think our suburban neighborhood was the embodiment of tranquility, a picture-perfect setting for a family like ours. But that all changed the day I discovered the truth lurking beneath our perfectly manicured lawns and cheerful facades. It began innocently enough, as most things do. One morning, while tending to my garden, I noticed a strange, iridescent growth on the roses. It looked like a tiny, translucent starfish, clinging to the petals. My curiosity piqued. I plucked it off and examined it closely. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before, a delicate mesh of tendrils, pulsating softly as if it were alive. I showed it to my wife, Emily, who dismissed it as a mere oddity. Probably some new breed of flower parasite, she said with a chuckle. We laughed it off and forgot about it, but that was the beginning of the end. Within days, more of these peculiar parasites appeared, not just on plants but also on insects and birds. They seemed harmless enough, just oddities of nature. But as the weeks went by, our once peaceful neighborhood began to change. People's behavior became erratic. Neighbors who once exchanged friendly waves now avoided eye contact. Children stopped playing outside, and the air grew heavy with an unspoken tension. Emily and I weren't immune to the changes either. We found ourselves arguing over trivial matters, our tempers flaring like never before. Our son, Ethan, became withdrawn, spending hours staring out of his window, his once bright eyes now clouded with a distant look. Then came the night I stumbled upon a horrifying scene. I was taking out the trash when I saw our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, standing in her backyard, her body contorted in unnatural angles. Her eyes were vacant, and her movements were jerky and mechanical. She was covered in those iridescent parasites, pulsating in synchrony with her grotesque movements. I watched in horror as she tore at the plants, spreading the parasites with a manic urgency. I rushed back inside and locked the doors, my heart pounding. I tried calling the police, but the line was dead. The news was equally grim, reports of similar disturbances throughout the neighborhood, of people behaving like marionettes controlled by some unseen puppeteer. Desperation pushed me to dig deeper into the origins of these parasites. Late one night, armed with a flashlight, I ventured into our backyard. The once pristine lawn was now a sea of writhing tendrils, a grotesque network that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. My light fell upon a hole in the ground, a pit teeming with those parasites. But they were different here, larger, more intricate. It was as if this was their breeding ground, their epicenter. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye, a shimmering, distorted figure standing at the edge of the pit. It was humanoid, but its proportions were all wrong, its limbs elongated and disjointed. Its head twitched as if trying to focus on me. Fear rooted me to the spot as its whispering voice slithered into my mind. Witness, observer, harbinger. I stumbled back, my heart racing, and managed to escape the yard. The encounter left me shaken, but it also ignited a fire of determination within me. I needed to find a way to stop this, to free my family and neighbors from the clutches of whatever force was controlling them. Days turned into weeks as I researched tirelessly, piecing together fragments of information about ancient rituals, extraterrestrial phenomena, and the dark corners of folklore. My investigation led me to believe that these parasites were alien in origin, a sentient species that had infiltrated our world with a sinister purpose. Armed with newfound knowledge, I began crafting a plan. I scavenged ingredients from around the neighborhood, combining elements from various sources to create a concoction I hoped would disrupt the parasite's control. With each passing day, the influence of the parasites seemed to grow stronger, their grip on our reality tightening. The night of reckoning arrived, shrouding the neighborhood in an eerie darkness. Armed with my makeshift solution, I ventured into the heart of the backyard, where the pit of parasites seethed. The shimmering figure emerged once more, its distorted form casting grotesque shadows in the moonlight. I threw the concoction into the pit, and a piercing shriek echoed through the air, a chorus of agony from the parasites. The ground convulsed, tendrils thrashing wildly. The figure contorted in pain, its form flickering and distorting before dissolving into a cloud of iridescent particles. The parasites, now writhing in agony, lost their control over the residents. Emily, Ethan, and I watched as the neighborhood slowly began to return to normal, the tendrils receding into the ground. The price we paid was heavy, the trauma, the loss of innocence, but we were free from the clutches of the infestation. In the aftermath, life gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the scars of that ordeal remained. Our once idyllic suburban haven had been forever tainted by the horrors we had witnessed. And as I gazed out into the yard, I couldn't help but wonder how many other neighborhoods, how many other families, were blissfully unaware of the lurking terrors that could unravel their lives in an instant. Alien hybrid nightmare. Every night, I am haunted by the same terrifying dream. It's like a relentless cycle of horror that wraps its icy fingers around my mind as soon as I close my eyes. I've become a prisoner of my own subconscious, trapped in a never-ending nightmare that I can't escape from. And as each night passes, the boundary between dream and reality blurs, leaving me in a state of perpetual fear. In this recurring dream, I find myself paralyzed, lying on an alien table in a dimly lit room. The air is heavy with an otherworldly scent, a mix of metallic tang and something sickeningly sweet. Above me loom shadowy figures with elongated limbs and dark, emotionless eyes. They move with an unsettling grace, their every gesture deliberate and precise. I try to scream, to beg for mercy, but my voice is stolen by an invisible force, leaving me mute and helpless. The memories of the dream come in disjointed flashes, like scenes from a movie on fast forward. I feel sharp, searing pain as they cut into my flesh, conducting their grotesque experiments. They insert cold, metallic instruments into my body, probing and extracting, and all the while, I am trapped in a body that is not my own. The pain is excruciating, yet I cannot escape, cannot wake up from this living nightmare. As the nightmarish images flicker in and out of focus, I catch glimpses of the creatures' faces. They are unlike anything I have ever seen, a twisted blend of insect-like features and humanoid form. Their skin is a sickly shade of grey, and their limbs seem to stretch on forever, bending and contorting in unnatural ways. But the eyes are the worst part, those hollow, black eyes that seem to pierce through my very soul. Weeks turn into months, and still, the dreams persist. I wake up every morning drenched in sweat, my heart racing as I try to shake off the lingering terror. The lines between day and night blur as I become increasingly sleep-deprived, the weight of the dreams pressing down on me like a suffocating darkness. I dread the moment when I have to close my eyes, knowing what horrors await me in the realm of sleep. And then, one fateful night, everything changes. I find myself once again on that cold, sterile table, but this time, something is different. The air is heavy with anticipation, and I sense a presence in the room that wasn't there before. As I struggle against my invisible restraints, I catch sight of movement in the shadows, two figures, smaller and more delicate than the others. My heart clenches in my chest as I realize what they're holding. Two fetal forms, suspended in translucent chambers, their alien features unmistakable. These are not the monstrous creatures that torment me. No, these are something else, something that sends a shiver down my spine. They look almost human, but distorted, their limbs elongated, their skin an eerie shade of blue-gray. Their eyes are closed, and they seem peaceful, as if they're merely sleeping. A voice, not audible, but echoing in my mind, speaks softly, they are yours. My heart pounds in my chest as I try to comprehend the words. No, I scream internally, they can't be mine, but the unseen presence insists, they are a part of you, a creation born from our experiments. Tears well up in my eyes as a mixture of horror and sorrow washes over me. The creatures, these hybrids, are a grotesque reflection of the violation I've endured in my dreams. I feel an inexplicable connection to them, a motherly instinct mixed with revulsion. I want to tear my gaze away, to reject their existence, but I am frozen, unable to look away from the twisted offspring before me. The dream begins to fragment, the scenes overlapping and fading like a broken film reel. The pain, the fear, the knowledge, it all swirls together in a maelstrom of emotion. And then, in a burst of searing agony, I wake up. I sit up in bed, gasping for air, my body drenched in sweat. The room is bathed in the cold light of dawn, and for a moment, I am disoriented, unsure if I'm still trapped in that nightmarish reality. Slowly, I touch my own skin, reassuring myself that I am in my own body, in my own room. But the memory of those hybrid creatures lingers, a haunting reminder of the darkness that resides within me. Weeks pass, and the dreams continue. The hybrids haunt my every thought, their presence an inescapable weight on my mind. I can't shake the feeling that they're real, that they exist somewhere beyond the confines of my nightmares. The boundary between dream and reality blurs even further, and I find myself questioning my own sanity. I've become a prisoner of my own mind, trapped in a cycle of horror that threatens to consume me. Every night, I relive the pain and fear, and every morning, I wake up with the knowledge that those creatures, those hybrids, are a part of me, whether I want them to be or not. And as the line between dream and reality fades, I am left to wonder if I will ever escape the darkness that has taken hold of my soul. The Hookman's Revenge. The air was thick with anticipation as Sarah and I drove down the winding road leading to our secluded cabin near the lake. The autumn leaves painted a mesmerizing tapestry of red and gold, setting the stage for what was meant to be a romantic weekend getaway. Nestled deep within the woods, the cabin promised us a peaceful retreat from the hustle and bustle of city life. As we settled into the cozy cabin, the crackling fireplace and the dim glow of the rustic lanterns cast an enchanting ambience. We unpacked our bags, feeling the weight of our everyday worries slipping away with each passing minute. The cabin had a timeless charm, seemingly untouched by the passage of years. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the cabin's windows framed the deepening darkness outside. Sarah and I shared stories and laughter, relishing the freedom of being away from it all. But as the night drew in, a strange sense of unease began to settle over us. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it an almost indistinguishable murmur. I turned on the small, vintage radio sitting on a wooden shelf, hoping to break the eerie silence. The radio crackled to life, and a news report began. My heart sank as I heard the words that seemed to cut through the air like a chilling breeze. An escaped convict, notorious for his hook for a hand, had managed to flee a nearby prison. The news anchor's voice was heavy with caution as he warned residents to stay vigilant. Sarah exchanged a worried glance with me, and we both couldn't help but remember the urban legend that had been whispered around campfires during our childhoods, the tale of the hookman, a malevolent killer with a hook for a hand who preyed on young couples. It was said that he would target those who parked in isolated areas, and his hook would gleam in the moonlight just before he struck. Trying to shake off the unease, we dismissed the news report as a mere coincidence. After all, urban legends were just stories, right? With a nervous laugh, we turned off the radio and decided to watch a movie to distract ourselves. As the movie played on, I noticed Sarah's gaze wandering toward the cabin's windows every now and then. Her fingers played with the pendant around her neck, a nervous habit I had come to recognize. I wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close, hoping to provide some reassurance. But then, a distinct scraping sound interrupted the movie's audio. It was as if claws were dragging along the roof of the cabin. My heart pounded in my chest, and I saw the color drain from Sarah's face. I muted the TV, and the scraping persisted, a slow, deliberate sound that seemed to crawl beneath our skin. "What is that?" Sarah's voice quivered. "I'm not sure." Maybe it's just a branch or an animal, I tried to sound confident, but my own fear was palpable. As if on cue, the scraping came to a sudden stop, leaving behind an almost suffocating silence. We exchanged a glance filled with unease, the tension in the room growing heavier by the second. Deciding to investigate, I cautiously made my way to the cabin's front door, Sarah clutching my arm. I stepped outside, the cold air biting at my skin. The moon hung in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the surroundings. I looked up at the cabin's roof, and there, hanging from the eaves, was a sight that sent shivers down my spine, an unmistakable, bloody hook. My heart raced, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. I turned to Sarah, who had gone pale, her eyes fixed on the gruesome object. The legends flooded back, and a sense of terror unlike any I'd ever experienced gripped me. "We need to call the police," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. We retreated back into the cabin and dialed 911, our voices shaky as we tried to explain the situation. The dispatcher assured us that officers would be sent to investigate. The minutes that followed felt like an eternity, the suspense and dread hanging in the air like a heavy fog. When the police arrived, we led them outside to show them the hook, but to our horror, it was gone. The eaves were empty, the only evidence of its presence being the faint stains of dried blood. The officers assured us that they would search the area, but their words did little to quell our fear. The rest of the night was a blur of anxiety and paranoia. Every sound outside seemed magnified, every creak of the floorboards inside sent our hearts racing. We huddled together on the couch, the darkness pressing in on us, as we waited for dawn to break. When the first rays of sunlight pierced through the curtains, we felt a glimmer of relief. The night had passed, and the cabin was bathed in the warm embrace of morning. The police returned later that day, reporting that they hadn't found any signs of the escaped convict nearby. As we packed our bags to leave the cabin, the sense of dread still lingered in the air. We locked the door behind us, the memories of that night etched into our minds forever. We had been thrust into a real-life horror story, one that left us questioning the lines between legend and reality. To this day, the sound of scraping branches or the sight of a hook brings back the fear and paranoia of that fateful night. The hookman's revenge, whether imagined or not, had left an indelible mark on our souls, a chilling reminder that sometimes, the darkest tales have a way of creeping into the realm of the living.
Thank you for watching, and remember, the darkness awaits. Until our paths cross again, stay fearful and stay subscribed.